questions about things he has said and things he has done.
You write, good luck and be careful at top.
I thought it was good advice.
Tonight, we take a look at Johnny Depp on the hot seat, answering questions about his substance use, his behavior, and some nasty text messages. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Closing Arguments. What happened in Virginia today? Holy mackerel. Has a lot of people scratching their heads tonight thinking, what on earth was going on in that home? How many substances did Johnny Depp take? And why on earth would he want to make all of this really, really public? What a day. We're gonna get to all of it. I wanted to start tonight talking about this, the cell phone, and how much of a game changer the cell phone has been in the world we live in and in the trials that we cover. It's tough to think about life before cell phones, and it's hard to think of trials before cell phones. Now, when you think of all the digital evidence that we see, and it begins with, text messages and anything else. I mean, pretty much whenever you're on your cell phone, you have to presume that nothing you are doing is going to be private. Nothing. It will all become public at some point. Because what you do on here is not private, whether it's social media, big tech, the government, or some lawyer somewhere subpoenaing your text messages. This stuff can very well go public very, very quickly. And from my perspective as a trial attorney, I love it. And as a prosecutor, I love it because oftentimes things that people say in their text messages takes us to a place that's tough to get to when you're trying to prove a case, which is in someone's brain, like in their mind, their innermost thoughts. Because when you're texting something or you're writing something or searching for something, you don't, at that moment, you're not thinking, at some point, everybody's gonna see this, which from my perspective makes it very revealing evidence. And what about that evidence today inside the courtroom? When you talk about text messages that Johnny Depp was sending to people about his wife, Amber Heard. I mean, we're gonna read some for you tonight, and you're gonna hear them, but you're gonna hear a lot of bleep, bleep, bleep. These are some nasty, vile messages in the way he talks about and describes his wife, Amber Heard. And this is all coming out on cross-examination. I mean, I don't care where you were sitting today, and what your viewpoints are of Johnny Depp. This was a tough day for Johnny Depp on that witness stand. Let's start tonight by taking a look at the testimony related to text messages sent by Johnny Depp.
Bettany, let's burn Amber. 3 exclamation points, right? You see that?
I do see that.
And at this time, June 11, 2013, Amber is your girlfriend or perhaps even your fiance at this point, correct?
Girlfriend,
yeah,
for sure.
And you didn't stop when you said, let's burn Amber. Because the next text down, you can move down and blow up the next text, please, Michelle. You say, let's drown her before we burn her. 3 exclamation points. Did I read that right?
Yes, it's referring to the text prior to.
You didn't stop when you said, let's drown her before we burn her. After that, you made another comment. I will her burnt corpse afterwards to make sure she is dead. That's what you said that you would do after you burned her and after you drowned her. Did I read that right?
You certainly did, yes.
And you wrote that about the woman who would later become your wife?
Yes, I did.
Okay. On January 17th, 2013, Mr. Depp, you texted the following. For the idiot cow, 3 exclamation points. Next text. Will do. I'll smack the ugly around before I let her in. Don't worry. And apologies again to the court and the jury for this language. And then you close by saying, did that worthless hooker arrive? Did I read that right?
You did, sir.
You said, I'm all right. I ... though I never, ever want to lay eyes on that filthy whore, Amber A., most embarrassing. Did I read that right?
Yes, you did.
And when you called Amber that filthy whore, she was your wife at the time, correct?
Yes, sir.
You tell Mr. Baruch on October 18th, 2016, hopefully that rotting corpse is decomposing in the trunk of a Honda Civic, 2 exclamation points. Did I read that right?
You did.
How about that? You know, and that was sort of the beginning of the day. There's a lot more to get to tonight, but that was the tone inside the courtroom today as the defense trying to expose Johnny Depp as an abuser and doing anything and everything they can to try to show this to the jury. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, joining us from Fairfax County, Virginia tonight, outside the courthouse, inside the courtroom during the day. Chanley, it was like earmuffs all morning long, a lot of bad words, but that aside, what were your takeaways from this cross-examination that lasted all day and will continue into next week?
Hours and hours worth of impeachment today. Johnny Depp, for the most part, able to remain calm and consistent. At times, those seemed impatient and sarcastic with a lot of wisecracks. And, of course, I have my eyes glued on this jury. For the most part, the jury glued in on the screen, reading text messages, scrutinizing, expressionless. For the most part, some derisive looks on their faces, maybe a little bit of disgust, but they had to listen to a lot of vulgar, potentially violent text messages and audio recordings, Vinny. So again, overall, this cross-examination really focused on several ways of impeachment, including impeaching Johnny Depp on his drug use, his alcohol use through text messages, impeaching him on hitting Amber Heard with text messages on the screen, apologizing about violence or about fights or about the monster that he referred to himself as. He was also impeached on the finger incident in Australia in 2015, where he says Amber Heard threw a vodka bottle at him, severing his finger, where the defense showed many messages where he told people he was the one who cut his finger off. And of course, he was also questioned about if that was true, why wasn't there any other damage on any other part of his hand if, in fact, a bottle was destroyed on his hand? And then finally, multiple audio recordings were played to also impeach him. The couple's conversations, one where he told her that Heard told Depp that he had vomited in his sleep, and another where he seemed to admit that he actually did headbutt her during an altercation in 2015. So a lot of information at this jury today, and at times, the chronology was a little bit confusing. It really skipped the years and the time, so you had to really be taking notes to know what happened and when.
Yeah, that was another part of this. I mean, the defense was jumping all over the place. And sometimes you do that purposely, so it's not so easy for the witness to follow exactly what is going on. But the other part of it is it gets a little more difficult for the jury to follow what's going along. I mean, we're all getting paid to try to follow it, so we're doing our best. But, you know, ultimately it will be up for the jury to figure it out. What did you notice about Amber Heard today?
I noticed a different Amber Heard today, especially compared to yesterday, Vinny, when Johnny Depp was on direct examination, able to talk on and on for up to 10 minutes at times, his version of the facts and events. She had a solemn look, almost at times on the verge of tears. And then, of course, today, her hair pulled back, a lot more communication with her attorney. She seemed more upbeat. I noticed more smiles from Amber Heard. At one time, she even mouthed to her attorney, "No, I'm all right." Sitting there at the table, she was passing notes. She was examining things on the screen, very participatory in the cross-examination. And inside the courtroom, after court was done, Vinny, in fact, I left before she did. She hung out late inside the courtroom talking to her team of attorneys on what she thought they should do, the questions I assume that they should be asking, and her feedback. So that was really interesting to see how she changed given the tone of the courtroom changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's very common in trials when like your term and your team is going. There's a different vibe for you inside the courtroom. And from my perspective, she seemed a little more relaxed today than she did in the past. Although Johnny seemed kind of the same for a lot of the day. How about just the general tone? Like the tone of this back and forth. Was it, because, you know, we're watching it on television inside the room. Are voices like up between counsel and Johnny, or is it all kind of even-keeled?
It is even-keeled, and nobody raised their voice. There wasn't any yelling. At times, they would talk over each other, and it was almost like who would win the battle of continuing the conversations. And it was interesting. Ben Rottenborn actually would defer to Johnny a lot of the times and let him overcome the conversation to say what he wanted. But also, Ben tried to hold his ground and maintain control, which was for the most part. But nobody had to raise their voice, and it just seemed a little contentious. But it was more like Johnny was put out with a lot of the questions he was being asked. There was one point, if you notice, Vinny, he's always like, did I read that right, was the question, which trapped Johnny into a yes or no answer, and that seemed to really get on Johnny's nerves. At one point, he was like, yes, you continue to read them right.
Yeah, it's fascinating dynamic, and there was a prior trial, so, I mean, there shouldn't be many surprises for either side throughout the course of this, but for us, we're seeing it for the first time because in the UK, no cameras, no microphones, but Court TV is bringing it to everyone now. Chanley Painter at the courthouse. We're going to check back with you in just a little bit. Want to bring in a special guest to help us. Always fascinated by his take on what is taking place. Joining us by phone in Los Angeles, California, senior editor for Deadline Hollywood, Dominic Patton, back with us. Dominic, what a day inside the courtroom. Much different. I'm interested first in your first impression of what we watched today.
I think we watched the end of Johnny Depp's career today.
Really?
I think that there was a petulant and disruptive individual who was having a very hard time listening to his own words, looking at his own photographs, hearing his own voice, and confronting realities. And by what that I mean is there was an emphasis and excellent reporting that you guys are doing. But another element of this was there was a lot of emphasis on his drug and alcohol use. There was a lot of emphasis by Ben Rottenborn, who honestly is like the best advertisement for himself he could ever be, in terms of his lawyering, low-key but strategic, and constantly getting Depp to admit to things that he doesn't want to admit to the point where he's had him admit that, in fact, there's not really any damages in this case anymore because he's shown that Johnny Depp had already lost any chance to be in Pirates of the Caribbean 6 before Amber Heard's op-ed in the Washington Post of December 2018, which never mentioned his name actually. They've shown in yesterday that there was articles, statements by Disney people, et cetera, before that. So you take that away, and then this great question of if I gave you $300 million, if Disney offered you $300 million, and then he said something exaggerated like a barn full of cows or something, I can't remember, would you be in Pirate 6? And Johnny Depp said no. So at that point, it's like, well, then what are you suing her for? You know, I think that they're having a hard time confronting these questions. And when you have things come up about like, well, I wasn't drinking heavily, that depends what you define as heavily. I start to think of Bill Clinton saying, you know, it depends on what you define the word is as. You know, it's like at this point, you're talking about detox. And interestingly enough, with all the foul language and threatening texts, there was also some other texts that were played today or spoken about today of Depp sending a text to Amber Heard after he had done a stint in rehab, a detox from oxycodone, saying, you helped me. I couldn't have made this without you, baby. You did this for me. Sending text to Amber's mother saying about how great Amber was, how she was totally there for him and helping him, et cetera, et cetera. So creating a very different dynamic. Clearly, there are no angels on either side of this case, but there are also, I think, a very distinct portrait being painted. And to further that, I will, if you don't mind me mixing a metaphor for a second, one of the things Depp talked about today, and he's talked about before, is, listen, I know I use colorful language when I speak in text. Texts are like a canvas, and I paint. Well, I'm sorry, Johnny. Texts are not a canvas. It's language, it's communication. And if you're saying things you don't mean, then you're going to have to own up to them, because those are the only things a jury can judge your conduct on, is the things you said and the things you did. And right now, under a very, very comprehensive cross-examination, those things are not looking good for Johnny Depp.
Dominic, let me go back to what you first said, that you think this ends his career. Because another picture, you mentioned all the drugs. Is there no place for redemption if he is perceived as an addict in all this? And if you look at the relationship, that there's this level of mutual volatility in this relationship between these two, because I don't know of any other women who've come forward, maybe you do, that have come forward saying they were beaten by Johnny Depp. But if the relationship is perceived as mutual volatility, two people that are just wrong for each other, and he's got some addiction issues, he can't come back from that?
Well, listen, we live in a country that believes in redemption. At least I believe in redemption. I know you do too, Vinny. And we know none of us can cast a stone. We all live in glass houses to some degree. But I think more than what we're looking here is the issues of Johnny's addiction to alcohol and pills at the very least, but the vast array of drugs that were put out there. But what's important to that is it's not alcoholism or drug addiction that is on trial here. It's a pattern of behavior and the what I would call the blast radius of these things. Constantly, you seem to have periods in the relationship where there are what some would term blackouts. Johnny seems to argue with this, gets in the weeds about it to some degree. And behavior that happened then. Some of the stuff you talked about earlier with, well, he can't really remember if it was him who wrote the thing on the wall or someone else, or maybe Amber did it. He doesn't know. Seems to be long periods of time in their relationship where he has no memory of the relationship. So to that, it plays to the issue of character, which is what a smart lawyer does here. Because Johnny has a high burden to meet of defamation. He has to show that he has been injured and damaged in an article that never actually mentioned him. Years after he and a woman divorced, where they signed a statement talking about some of the problems in their relationship, which he now sort of says, well, you know, I didn't really mean to sign that, but I did. It's like, well, then, so what is it? That's the problem they've got here. You have a witness who is not being consistent with his own story and is faced with evidence that he is having a very hard time refuting. Now, that's what a good cross-examination is. You know that better than me, my friend. So, but I feel like it makes him definitely a toxic asset going forward. And let's be clear, Johnny Depp's career hasn't exactly been blockbuster for a while. This only adds to that.
Dominic Patton, senior editor, Deadline Hollywood, breaking tons of news on this case and tons of others. Thanks so much, Dominic. Great to hear you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. When we come back, folks, we're going to pick up on some of the things that Dominic was talking about, which is the violent behavior of Johnny Depp that was came out through cross-examination, including some video of Johnny Depp smashing some stuff. We'll show you the video and bring in our guests next.